Hi everyone and welcome to Tim Topham TV episode 4. I'm super excited about this episode. I've got Colin Thompson all the way from California. We're about to have a chat with him and it's all about sight reading today. Now, before you groan and switch off, another boring sight reading thing, you've got to see what Colin has been working on for the last, few months, I think, probably more in fact. And we're actually going to talk about some teaching tools which Colin has developed, which are, in my opinion, revolutionary, and I don't use that term flippantly. He's been doing some amazing things, and I'm sure you'll get heaps out of this episode. And we've also got some special offers towards the end for the work that he's doing. Now, just before we get started too, I did want to thank the people that have left reviews on iTunes. It's been going really well. And it's so good to read those reviews. It does take quite a bit of time to put each episode together, so I appreciate each time people are able to spend the time doing that. So thank you very much to all the reviewers, and if you're interested in leaving a review, there are instructions on the website under the podcast menu. So, Colin, without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tim. I'm excited. To be on this.
It's really good. We probably sort of met online maybe a year ago, and Colin's been working tirelessly on sight reading products for teachers. So before we get into exactly what we're talking about today, Colin, do you want to just give everyone a little bit of a welcome to you and a bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I am a piano player, teacher, composer for media. Music for media, which is why I live out in Los Angeles, California. Let's see, I graduated from the Wheaton College Conservatory of Music in Chicago, graduated there with a degree in music composition in 2013, so that was only a couple of years ago. Got married to a beautiful woman, moved to Los Angeles shortly thereafter to pursue film composition and music education. That was about a year and a half ago now. Been teaching private piano lessons out here. And I would say that as I got more and more into teaching piano and music in general, that's when I started to get more and more interested in what the internet could offer as far as supplemental services to traditional piano lessons. And I feel like it's a very powerful tool for a lot of applications that just haven't been explored at all yet. So
yeah, absolutely. And most people who are readers and followers of my blog know that that's definitely something close to my heart, which is, I think, why I'm so excited about what you're doing. And look, when we talk about sight reading, a lot of people will have read previous posts about it that I've made. I'm a big believer in it, and it's almost a skill I put above a whole lot of other things in my studio, because I believe if students can sight read, then their whole piano experience becomes easier. In my opinion, they're more likely to keep on playing after lessons finish. There's just a whole raft of benefits to being able to sight read quickly and easily. And I guess I was obviously taught well and taught some tricks, and I've practiced it a lot, so I'm reasonably competent at it. But it's not always easy to pass that skill on to students. So that's why it's really, really interesting to hear someone doing something more than just putting out another book of sight reading exercises, because I think the other thing about it is that we've all come through some kind of piano lessons, and I imagine that many of us are in the category of our teacher just saying, look, you got to do it for your exam or whatever it is, and you just got to do more of it. That's kind of the mantra. If you're going to get better at sight reading, just sight read more. But that has to be about the least effective method that I've found in my studio anyway. So I'm really interested to find out what specifically brought you to focus on the sight reading aspect of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a good sight reading story that kind of got me started down that path. When I was actually going in for my audition at the conservatory that I went to school at in 2008, I guess is when I would have been doing that. Mm-hmm. I was definitely concerned about the sight reading portion. I knew that I had to play a couple of pieces, and I knew that sight reading was going to be on the docket. Leading up to that, I didn't really work on it that much because it's just kind of a mindset, I feel like, that I and a lot of people had at the time of, well, it's sight reading, you know,
Yeah.
sight reading, you know, preparing sight reading it's not compatible. It doesn't work. That's the whole idea of sight reading, is that you can't prepare for it. So I really didn't that much. I put all of my effort into what I felt were, you know, my sure bets, my pieces that I'd been working on for months leading up to it, and got through them pretty decently in the audition. And one of the professors gave me a piece of music to read. You know, I put it up there, and I got about halfway through, I think, the second line, and I felt like it was going all right. It sounded a little interesting, but I thought it was going all right. And one of the professors stopped me and said, "Colin, hold on just 1 second. You want to take a real quick look at the key signature and just jump back there and try again?" And I think it was like, you know, A flat, 4 flats, or something like that. And I was reading it in C, and you know, it left its mark on me, you know, just a little bit.
Yeah, that kind of experience would absolutely. A lot of students would have had a similar experience when it comes to, like, we're all very big on exams here in Australia, and one part of the exam, the tiny little bit at the end, is have a go at this sight reading, and
Yep.
it's terrifying for so many people.
It is. It's the one that people just do get absolutely terrified about, and I feel like I'm not alone in being the one who, you know, being the most terrified, still prepared the least for it, you know, which is interesting.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, you've been, you know, exploring and working on sight reading, and you've obviously put a lot of thought into it, and you've thought about what actually helps people sight read better. And this is what I think is so important about the kind of videos and technical things that you're putting out. But you've also, I know you've got a number of tools that we can use straight away that you can recommend to teachers to talk about. And I think you might have them on a sheet that we're going to put on the show notes too, aren't we?
Yes.
So can you talk about some of them? Because I know there's some things in there that teachers won't have even ever thought about or heard about. And I think this is really important. So yeah, do you want to talk to some of those things that teachers can do right now, and that your software will help with, but so they can get a bit of a background on it?
Yeah, for sure. You want to just kind of run through the 9 things that I consider the best?
Yeah. So Colin's got like a 9 kind of step plan, and we've got a checklist of these. So we'll put them in the show notes. And the first one you say is systematic eye patterns.
That's
so
right.
Tell us about what that is.
Absolutely. So it's interesting to note how few pianists have really, really thought about the path, or musicians in general. This goes for musicians in general. I've really thought about the path that their eyes take when they're reading music in general, but especially when they're sight reading. The key here is to not just let your eyes jump haphazardly anywhere. Which is what most people do, you know. So especially if you're sight reading something, you're probably on the edge of your seat, you're a little anxious about it, and your eyes are probably just darting all over the place.
Yep.
But one way that you can actually really improve the effectiveness of your reading is to read from the bottom to the top of every beat inside of every measure, starting out like that. So it's kind of a pattern like this, if you can see it on the screen, where you're just reading from the bottom to the top, you know, like that, very quickly on each beat. And then you get to the point where you can do that with 2 beats, or, you know, a full measure or whatever. But part of the reason that I recommend bottom to top is because it starts out, of course, with usually the most important aspects of the harmony, so that hopefully you can grasp the harmony a bit, fill in the blanks if you really need to. But beyond that, if you're not to that level in your playing, it's a huge step forward to have that systematic pattern, because the muscles in your eyes get more and more used to that pattern as they do it over and over again, and it just becomes an effective order for the notes to get to your brain. Because if we think about it, right, the notes have to go from the page through your eyes, through your brain, and then out your fingers, right? And if you're throwing them at your brain in a different order every single time, you're just making things way harder on yourself than they really need to be.
Yeah, so it's about a system. And I'm interested in this because I was taught when I was younger to read a lot of hymns, which are all built from the ground up. And I think that's probably been really good practice for me. But kids don't play, obviously, hymns these days. Definitely not a very cool thing to do. So there's some tools you've got for doing that, I imagine, is there? For practicing that skill of reading bottom up?
Right. Yeah. Well, what I recommend, and this is kind of going on to tip number two, is to use a tracer of any kind. This is something that you can. This is helpful to you. Whether you're on the Sight Reading Academy program or not. You can certainly put this into practice today. So grab a pencil or a pen or anything like that, and you're just going to be tracing from the bottom to the top. So you're tracing out that eye movement on the page itself.
Right. Over a score.
Exactly. So you got that piece of paper in front of you, and you're tracing on to the bottom to the top, from the bottom to the top of each beat inside of each measure, and you're following along with a metronome. And then you can gradually speed that up to the point where it's actually hard for you to keep your eyes focused on the tip of whatever tracer it is that you're using, whether it's a pencil or whatever it be. And it's really interesting how this mechanical device will improve your muscles. Okay. So if you were to try to follow a steady line with your eyes actually move in fixations. They don't move gradually. They fix on an object, and then they jump and they fix on an object, and that your eyes jump from object to object rather than moving smoothly.
That's a physiological thing. That's what our eyes
exactly
do.
Yeah. Yep. And everybody does that. But what's interesting is that you can actually speed up your rate of fixation considerably just through the use of a mechanical device, because it allows you to it gives you a guide so that you can basically mechanically move the speed up faster and faster and faster, so that your eyes are actually jumping from not always from note to note, but from fixation to fixation, faster and faster. Yeah. And it's kind of cool that it's actually just like actually speeding up the rate of your eyes, which of course we would understand is essential to good sight reading, is be quick eyes. Have the fastest eyes on the block.
Absolutely, yeah.
What we're going for here.
Already you're kind of blowing my mind, because I wouldn't have even thought about trying to train my eyes to move faster when it comes to sight reading. It's all about, you've got to read what's on the page and get it as right as you can. And you're going, right. No, there's actually other things we can do. So that's great. And I think you've got videos on your website about this in more detail, haven't you?
I do.
Teachers can actually see exactly what you mean.
Yes.
Great. So that was step 2, which was readjust your fixation rate and increase your fixation rate, I guess is what we're getting to. Step 3, you mentioned, you're talking about directional intervals. Well, what does that mean?
That means, and this is more of a commonly taught concept, I think, but the idea is that you don't have to actually think about the name of every note that you read, right? Our brains are very spatially oriented brains. This is why one of the more higher level memory techniques is to, imagine a room. Maybe, I don't know, some people have probably heard about this. Like, imagine a room with a lot of detail and place your memory in a specific part of the room or something like that. So you go back and it triggers your brain to remember this. And this is because of how spatially oriented we are. We can remember spatial things a lot better than we can remember just facts, hard facts. So sheet music is laid out fantastically as far as its spatial organization goes. Pretty well, it could have the staves, stayed a little close together maybe, but overall, I would say that it's a pretty good system, and it makes sense spatially. So what I try to encourage my students to do is to really take advantage of this spatial orientation and look for that interval. Read the interval, whether it be a harmonic or a melodic interval. Try to read that, and don't get hung up on what the actual names of the notes are. Yeah.
I tell my students this all the time. This is it got to be the most important thing, and to be able to just quickly recognize the intervals of a third and a fifth, chords and octaves, and just be able to go, okay, if I know the bottom note's an E in the right hand, and I can see the next one's 2 lines up, I know that's a fifth. I don't have to think about what note that is or whatever it is. I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it? Just drilling quickly, the ability to recognize these shapes and patterns.
It's a shortcut.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You don't need all that information going through your brain.
No, that's right. And you couldn't possibly, I try and think, just before this, I was trying to think as I was sight reading something, what I'm actually doing. It's incredibly difficult to actually work out what you're doing. But I guess a heap when it comes to sight reading. Just thinking, just looking at the harmony and guessing what key I'm in, what chords are going to come up. So that's obviously really important. All right, so you've got a bit of an exercise. Step 4 is talking about an octave interval exercise. What's that one about?
Yeah, this is fun. So let's see. Let's step back. So if you were to try to know what white note you were playing, and say, let's imagine a piano that had no black notes, you would have no idea, right?
Yep.
I mean, you could count for the bottom if you wanted to, but that's just, you would have no idea.
Yeah.
So the way that we orient ourselves on the white keys, and thereby all of the rest of the keys as well, is through the black keys. Now, most of us will do that with our eyes, but as it turns out, it works just fine with our sense of touch, as you would expect. You know, it works fine that way. In a way that I practice that with my students is we'll just take one finger, finger 3 in one hand, and without looking down at your hand, you can close your eyes, whatever you want to do. Just play, start maybe with an E, and then move up a note to an F, back to the E, move up a note to the G, and you're jumping. And so you're playing all of these notes with the same finger. Mm-hmm. So your hand is jumping from note to note rather than, just trying to play them with normal pianistic fingering.
Yep.
All the way out to an octave, to the point where you are either guessing or, better yet, you're feeling the black notes and orienting yourself quickly with that, because you actually can. And this is something that actually, it comes to people pretty quickly. They don't realize, I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is actually for them to know where they are on the keyboard, as long as they're conscious of what the black notes feel like. So this is one that I'll throw another octave in there too. So you get up to the point where you're jumping 2 octaves. And, you can do it. When you start out, it takes a little bit of time. You kind of have to really feel your way around. And then you start to be able to feel where you are using the black keys very quickly. And, of course, this makes it so that when you don't have to be looking down at your hands, that's obviously going to be a huge benefit to your sight reading, because it allows you to just gulp in as much information as you can without being interrupted by looking somewhere else while you're reading.
Absolutely. It's undoubtedly, I think all the teachers listening to this are going to be going, oh, it's the hardest thing to stop kids doing is look down. Yeah. And my teacher used to put a tea towel over my fingers to force me to keep my eyes up. I put
really?
Old books in front of
I do that all the time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of training, doesn't it? And a lot of self-discipline for a student to practice not looking at their hands if they're really used to it. When you do that exercise, do they have their eyes shut, or have they got a peripheral view of the keyboard if they're looking ahead, sort of thing?
I'll do both. More of a realistic situation would be that, peripheral vision being involved. But especially starting off, I'll have them close their eyes, because I want them to get used to just only relying, don't glance down at all, just close their eyes. And, moving on, it's all right to have a little peripheral vision involved, but I like to isolate feel at first when we start working on this.
And the goal isn't necessarily, by the time you're getting to a 7th or 6, like bigger intervals, it's not necessarily to jump and hit the note, or
right.
Is it to kind of go up and just feel the black, where you are in the black notes, and then get the right note? I'm not confused as to which way to go.
You're breaking up just a little bit, but so it's not so much the jump. It's more like, make an educated guess. And when you get where you think you are, then make sure that you're feeling the keys before you commit to the white key that you're actually going to be playing.
Okay, cool. And I'm sure you've got a video about that one as well.
Yep.
Yeah, yep. Fantastic. Okay, so look, I reckon that's a great exercise that any teacher can use tomorrow in their lesson and try at home themselves. Just trying to make sure that they can get that interval jump themselves, and that their students are doing the same thing. Good one. I like it.
Absolutely.
All right. Step 5, you mentioned another tip is to isolate speed. So what do you mean there? Have I still got you?
I got you. Yeah. Just lost you for a second there.
That's right. Did you hear my question?
You want to run through that question real quick?
Yeah, okay. It's all right. We can cut that. We can cut it out. Okay. So the next tip you've got is talking about isolating speed. So can you tell us what that's about?
Yeah, absolutely. This has to do with the idea that at some point when you're sight reading music, you're going to come across quick music, and you're going to have to be able to handle that. A lot of us tend to be used to learning music slowly, and then introducing speed over the course of the time that we spend practicing it. But in order to be able to practice sight reading music very quickly, I like to pick music that is written to play music with one hand. So I grab music that's written for the violin or something like that if I want to practice my right hand by itself, or the cello, something like that, a bass instrument if I want to practice my left hand by itself. And then I set the metronome at an uncomfortably fast speed. And, I go for it. And another reason that I actually like using these instruments is that these are fully fleshed out pieces a lot of times. So it's kind of cool, if it's a solo piece for the violin, I might not be able to reach all of those intervals, certainly, but I do what I can. But it sounds cool because it's actually meant to be. You're playing the whole music that was meant the way that it was meant to be, but still with just one hand. You're practicing, looking ahead as far as you possibly can, because that's an essential aspect of sight reading. And you get to hear some music that as a piano player you may not know at all.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Have you got examples of those on your website, or that we could link to, or some of the ones that you use?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be able to. I can link to some IMSLP stuff that I like to use for sure on that.
That's great, and that, again, something I would not have ever thought of doing. So this is really good. I'm getting lots of tips. I'm loving it. So step 6, you then talk about using your peripheral vision, which we talked about before. So can you elaborate on that one a bit more?
Yeah, it's interesting. I borrowed a couple of these tips from speed readers, people who have put a lot of work into learning how to read, 2, 3, 10, 100 times faster than the average person. It's shocking what some of these people can do. But this is one of them. Apparently, and I found this to be the case, without training, most people use approximately half of the peripheral vision that is available to them. And you think about this, we get all basically focused in on what we're focusing on.
Yeah.
Actually, what the word focus means. So we get all focused on just this one focal point, and we're wasting a lot of the ability that's built into our eyes to be able to recognize what's going on in our peripheral vision beyond what we're actually focusing on. So what I like to do for this is just have a student just glance at a measure. Sometimes I'll actually even highlight one of the notes in the measure red, so I can tell them just look at this note for an instant, and then look away and try to play the measure.
Okay, without looking consciously at the other notes around it.
Exactly. It's one of those things where you need a little self-discipline to avoid, actually looking at everything. But it's a fun exercise to do with yourself too, because it shows you how much musical information you can pick up with just looking at one place for one instant and then looking away. Maybe not more than a measure or so, maybe not a full measure, depending on what it is. But it does demonstrate how much of that information you can pick up, and you can kind of put this into context when you're reading. And you're hopefully able to kind of plow ahead with your eyes as far as you can, just picking up a lot of information through, fewer fixations. Going back to the whole fixation idea, we speed up fixations, but then we also take out the number of fixations we really, really need when we use our peripheral vision like this. One of the tricks that speed readers of books and stuff, word speed readers do is their eyes don't jump to the beginning of each line. Rather, they jump to maybe the third or fourth word in from the beginning of each line, and they don't go to the end, because they've gotten used to recognizing and being able to read the words without actually looking at them. So it cuts out a good portion of the distance that your eyes travel when you're using them this way.
I'm just trying to picture myself doing the same thing. I mean, they must only fixate on maybe 2 parts of every line or something, almost.
Yeah, depending. It's one of those things that. Right, exactly. And it's one of those things that I've practiced myself with it, as far as just reading, trying to speed up my reading. And both of those things, speeding up the rate of fixation and the peripheral vision thing, they make a huge difference if you really want to speed up your reading. So there's a little tip for your listeners too, if they want to be speed readers.
And if you've got the time to work on all these things, of course.
That's right. If you just want to experiment, you just get your feet wet in a bunch of things like me.
Yeah. No, I can see. I mean, it makes absolute sense that being able to actually just look at one note and then grasp the idea of the notes around it. But I can sort of hear people going, how do I actually practice that skill? And I have a feeling that later on we'll just talk about some of the things that you've developed, which actually helps these skills being practiced, doesn't it? Because that would be a hard one to actually sit down and do yourself, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's It can be done. You can do it in a similar way to the reading one, where instead of actually, consciously forcing yourself not to start at the beginning of each line, and not to read to the end of each line. A lot of it has to do with being self-disciplined with your eye movements, and that's actually, looking back on this, is about half of what my tips have been anyway.
Yeah.
Being really self-disciplined with your eye movements, so that you're consciously thinking about what your eyes are doing. You're not wasting movements. They're moving quickly and they're moving efficiently. And using the peripheral vision is definitely part of that. So, but to go back to your question, I mean, I think that it is something that peripheral vision, beginning and ending of lines, is certainly something you can put into playing immediately. But as you use this exercise, is just glancing at a measure, glancing away, and playing it, you will kind of get used to processing that information without actually looking at it.
Yeah, and given we're working with two lines, we'd obviously have to have a point
Yes.
of fixation at the left hand and the right hand. Left hand
Certainly.
first, right hand first. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's good. All really really interesting ideas. All right. So step 7, you've said increase your short term memory.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's going to help. But how does that help when it comes to the fact that you're playing music that you've never seen before? How's memory help?
Yeah, this is really cool. This is something I geek out about just a little bit. So short-term memory is, I forget the technical term for it, but it is basically what relates to how high a person can score in an IQ test normally, which is interesting, given the fact that, the IQ test is traditionally, compared with intelligence. Of course, we know that that's a drastic oversimplification of the matter. But if you can increase your IQ score, I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Your short-term memory is how much information you can store in this backlog of your memory to be pulled up immediately. So you would use this when you're working on maybe a complex or even a not so complex math problem in your mind, where you're not writing out information, but you have to hold all these digits in your mind while you're working through the problem. Most people will find it incredibly taxing, only getting up to, a few, maybe 5 or 6.
Right.
It's tough to hold them in there. And just recently, I would say maybe in the last, I'm going to guess maybe like 5 to 10 years, there's been a bit of a breakthrough as far as the ability to increase your short-term memory. For the longest time, it was considered something that was just, predetermined.
Okay, yeah.
You had a certain a set of short-term memory that you were given, and some people had more and some people had less, and those who had more did better on technical issues, basically because most technical issues require short-term memory. And when it comes to holding information in your mind like this, you see how important that would be to sight reading, because it directly affects how far ahead you can look in the music and then play that, because you want to be storing all of this musical information in your brain while you're reading ahead, and then sending it at the appropriate time to your fingers to play it.
Okay, so this is the idea of that really short-term memory. It's like remembering the bar or two while you're looking ahead to the next couple. Yeah, okay.
This is the memory you fill up and you empty out, in half a second. Yeah, exactly. Very quickly.
Yeah, right.
So the idea that you can increase this is kind of a really cool breakthrough, and there's a bunch of free programs online that I've used that I've actually been able to see improvement in my own short-term memory. I haven't done the whole IQ test before and after thing, but there is evidence to that effect too. It's called dual end back training. There's a bunch of free programs that you can download. They're very frustrating at first.
Should we put a link to that in the show notes?
Yeah, we'll definitely link to them. But basically what they do is they require you to hold 2 bits of information in your brain coming from various sources. So on your screen will be flashed a box in your screen looks like a tic-tac-toe game.
Okay.
And a box will flash in one of those squares, and a letter will be said in your headphones or audio, your speakers, and the idea is to remember back 2 steps, or as you improve 3 steps so that you do the right command when it comes back around. So that you hit the right button on your keyboard when it flashes the same place that it flashed, 4 back, or when they say the same thing that they said 4 back. It's very painful at first.
It's
actually
awful.
It gets better though. It really does.
Wow. And so is that, is there also a musical way that you get people to practice that?
Well, I mean, that's something that I've thought about a lot. Like, how cool would it be to make a version of that dual end back training that actually uses musical notes or something like that? I haven't done it myself, but let's put it out there.
Room for
let's
development.
Put it out there for your listeners for sure. Somebody needs to do that.
So we've talked about short-term memory and the importance of that, and we've also got you've got a step about large pattern recognition, which I kind of think we might have touched on a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. This is just a general idea that you can assume quite a bit from a limited amount of information because music is so pattern driven. The idea that you can make pretty educated guesses at what's going on, and even if you're a couple notes off, it's sight reading, and that's expected as long as you can make it sound pretty good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of sight reading has to do with just plowing forward regardless of what happens and making it sound good regardless of whether you're playing exactly what's there or not,
Yeah.
So this is the idea of inferring as much as you can from as little as you can, and this is another thing that you can isolate, and kind of look at a couple measures and see if you can kind of guess where it's going with that limited amount of information. I like to do little things like that sometimes because it throws a little competition too, which of course is fun.
Yeah.
But I think that it also improves because when you start looking at music that way and you start inferring as much, information as you can from that limited amount, it takes away some of the work that you have to do to actually assimilate the musical information on the page.
Absolutely. And and that's why I push teaching chords and progressions really early on, because that harmonic basis to music is where it's all constructed from. And I think that's why I can sight read reasonably well, because I can predict progressions and chord movements. So my little finger or my left hand can kind of make stuff up which seems to be about right. The problem is though that if teachers aren't teaching any kind of chord-based structure, then I think this large pattern recognition becomes harder. Would you agree with that? Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt. It's one of those things where, as a musician, you really have to be a holistic musician. You can't, even if you're a performer, you can't throw the theory out the window. And when it comes to sight reading, it's incredibly important to try to, get in the mind of the composer as much as you can when you're reading, because that's going to help with this large pattern recognition. That's going to help you understand and infer a lot, about what's going on in the music. So I absolutely agree with you there, Tim.
Yeah. And look, I've got a free video about the basis of how I teach chords, so I'll give a plug for that. That's in my Piano Flicks Piano Teacher pop music training, actually. But the second video is free, and it's all about how I introduce chords, how students can use chords, because look, it's so crucial. I don't understand how teachers still teach without giving kids some idea of chords and the background to music in that regard. So hopefully this might encourage some teachers, perhaps if they haven't tried it, to go, maybe I can see that this does have an importance when it comes to music reading in general, and not just going note to note, as you say.
Right. Yeah, and I'll second that plug. That's a fantastic course. Everybody should check it out. I'm a big fan. I've implemented a lot of that stuff in my own teaching.
Oh, thanks, Colin. I haven't even paid you to say that. Thank you. And the last step you've got in your tips for sight reading is, it just says habits of good sight reading. So what are you talking about there?
Yeah, so this is going back to one of the things that you threw in early on, where you said that a lot of teachers will just say, just sight read a lot,
Yeah.
But in their defense, that's the real secret sauce when it gets right down to it.
You got to practice it. There's no doubt.
Yeah, you gotta just make it a part. Make it a part of your daily practice. It's interesting, in a 1992 MTNA study of MTNA, which is an association of music teachers. piano teachers, in a study done of them, 92% of them called sight reading either a highly important or the most important pianistic skill that a pianist can have. And
Hang
then
on, 90%?
92%.
Okay, yep.
Yep. Yeah. Those are pretty intense, that's pretty intense verbiage right there. A highly important or the most important.
Yeah.
And yet, shockingly, wait for it, 7% of those same teachers taught it in any systematic way. And, I don't know how much has changed since then, but I feel like in my own experience, it's neglected a lot. It's neglected to a huge extent, especially when you get right down to how essential it is, how practical of a skill it is. If you want to set your student up to be able to have a career in music, it's essential to be able, just enjoy playing music without needing to put in, a week or two of practice on it. It's essential to that. It's one of the most practical skills that a musician can have, and I feel like it's neglected quite a bit. Yeah. So that's why I recommend 5 to 8 minutes a day. It doesn't have to take up a large portion of your practice time, but I think 5 to 8 minutes is probably quite a bit more than a lot of pianists do as far as throwing it in with their practice.
Yeah.
And of course this is part plug for Sightreading Academy, because we just make it super easy too. You can do it on your own, and I did that for a little while, but it's a pain because that 5 to 8 minutes turns into 30 minutes of tracking down the right music. Even with a fantastic resource like imslp.org, you're still flipping through a bunch of different pieces trying to find one that's the inappropriate level for you, and you're just wasting a lot of time. Probably that's literally going to be triple the amount of time if you do try to track it all down on your own, which of course you can do if you're that motivated. But Sightreading Academy, you just kind of go to the website, click a button, and you got a day waiting for you, basically about 5 to 8 minutes of sight reading waiting for you right there. So
that was a brilliant segue to Sightreading Academy. So Sightreading Academy is Colin's new resource online for piano teachers. Now, is it for teachers or students or both?
It's both. As a student, I highly encourage you to take the initiative and sign yourself up. I had a lot of students who, this is a great option for you if you are maybe going to be auditioning for college soon. It would have, helped me out quite a bit. Or any standardized testing program. A lot of times, that's actually what gives the little push behind to say, I really do need to work on my sight reading some. So sign up. You can get an individual account, or as a teacher, you can get a teacher account where you just invite your students through the account. And then, of course, you're going to get a discounted rate for multiple students. And then you can also track their progress. So you can go in on the site and you can see and make sure that they're kind of keeping it steady throughout the week. They're not just doing like one day or something.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so you've given away all your tips already. Why, or how's that going to connect to this Sightreading Academy? Why would I, as a teacher, check it out?
Yeah, well, so I think that the reason that the amount of teachers who teach sight reading is so low is because of that barrier to entry when it comes to practicing at home. If you think about the percentage of your students that really do the amount of practice that you want them to do, and then you think about the percentage of your students who would be willing to go that extra mile and track down all the music so that they could effectively practice sight reading at home, I think we can all agree it's going to be a very low number, maybe even lower than that 7% of teachers who teach.
Yeah, okay. And parents who don't really want to, you don't want to buy a sight reading book that's going to last a few weeks, do you?
I feel like a sight reading book is
a waste of money.
Yep, it is a waste of money because when you get right down to it, after you've read the music, you're no longer sight reading it, and that's why the internet is such a fantastic medium for this. It allows the new music to just. What we do is we set you up with a steady stream of new material so that you never run out. You're just on the system, and you just get a new day's worth of sight reading material every time that you go to the site. It's available there for you, and then whenever you feel like you're ready to move up to the next level in sight reading, it's just a quick, simple level up process involved as well. So that's it. That plus Plus, we do have some multimedia exercises that are really cool as well to help students read ahead. I don't know. You want me to kind of
Yeah,
describe
absolutely.
them?
Because I think these are, yeah, I think these are the gold. This is the stuff that is revolutionary in what you've done. So it's not just like, it's great that teachers can even get emailed, or students get emailed every day music if they choose to to Sightread. But I think it's not just the music. You've actually created these visual exercises that test all those steps you were talking about, like being able to fixate. And so, yeah, please talk about it now, because I reckon this is amazing.
Yeah. Well, what we do is, and it's not all. By the way, you can turn on or off email notifications. So if parents are out there, they feel like they don't want their email inbox being filled up or whatever.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
About that. Yeah. So this is kind of building off of the whole idea of a teacher, holding an index card over the part of the measure of music that you're reading. I don't know if your teachers ever did that with you, if you ever do that with your students.
I do it.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. A lot of us went through that experience. It's a good time.
Yeah.
But it's building off of that. It's using technology to manipulate the music in ways similar to that, where we have a few different exercises. One of them just kind of blocks out the measure that you're playing while you're playing it. So these are video exercises. You just press play on a video, and you hear this metronome ticking in the background, and you have 2 measures worth of counting, and then you start playing. But when you start playing, that first measure is covered up so that you actually can't see it. You can just see the rest of the music. So what I found is that students get comfortable looking at the music, at the notes that they're playing, not because they have to, but because it's a little comforting to them to be staring down those notes. But they know the notes already. They're really wasting their eye movements if they're staring down the notes while they're playing them. And yeah, that's kind of what we naturally graduate towards doing without training. So there's that one exercise where we cover up that portion of the music. There's another exercise where we just show you one measure at a time. So the full screen is filled up with one measure, but it's not the measure that you are reading. It's the measure that you will be reading, right? So you got one measure to focus on, and it's the measure that's coming. But throughout that whole process, you're playing the measure that you just saw. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's working out that whole concept of short-term memory, right? Because you got to keep that measure in your memory, and then forge ahead with your eyes and comprehend the music, but keep that measure in your memory so that you can you can play it correctly or close to correctly. This is also a really tricky exercise. I'll be the first to admit that.
No, I found it really difficult when I've been using it as well. It's really hard. Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I do like, to some extent, how tricky it makes it, because it forces you to make some stuff up too.
That's true.
Just make it happen one way or another. Play some stuff in the key that sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's shocking how many of the best sight readers, in a pinch, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're fooling you.
Yeah. I'm a great one for making stuff up. It's a very bad habit in some ways.
In some ways it can be. You want the ability to read as much as you can, but you want the ability to get yourself out of those tight situations.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that comes right down to just, making some stuff up. So the way that a lot of times it works on this exercise, which we call quick mem for, quick memorization, you get to the point where as you're doing it, you're pretty good at knowing what the first beat is, and then you get foggy as we get into the extra beats in that measure. So you get the first beat of every measure correct, and then the rest you kind of fall apart a little bit, and then you get the first beat of the next measure correct. But as you do it, maybe you get it to 2 beats. The first 2 beats are good, and then you're kind of falling apart. But I really think that it's still fantastic sight reading exercise, even because of this, even though it is certainly quite tricky. And then we have one more that's called Foresight Reader. This one grays out the whole page so that you can see it. You can use your peripheral vision to be able to see the full page, but there's a lit up portion of the screen that again is ahead of where you're reading. Okay. So you get that 2 measure count in, and then that lit up like box on the screen follows, it doesn't follow, it goes ahead of where you're reading. So that you can still use your peripheral vision. This is the closest one to a real sight reading environment. But it's designed to sort of gently guide your eyes to where they should be looking, so that as you're playing, you're continually reminded, oh yes, my eyes should be traveling that measure or two ahead, rather than falling back where they keep wanting to be going back to.
Yeah, I found that one a tough one as well, actually, because I kept wanting to look, because you can see the notes through the grey. I kept wanting to look through them, but yes, it's great. Look, I'll only ever sort of recommend products that I've been using that I'm a huge fan of, and I reckon this is absolute gold. So it's just to remind teachers, once their student has signed up, we'll talk about how that actually works in a second. Each day, 5 days in a week, is that right?
It's actually as many days as you want, 7 days.
Yeah. Okay, so they get either an email if they choose to, or they can just log into the website, and there's their days laid out, their days sight reading, and it'll have some of these exercises that are video kind of programmed in to hide bits and whatever else, and then it finishes with a couple of just clean normal sight readings, I think. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Yeah, and they tick it off, they're done, and then their sight reading's kind of finished. And I assume teachers can use this in a lesson as well.
Oh, certainly, of course, and it's a great idea to if you're starting a student on it, definitely do it in the lesson a couple times so that you can show them how you want them to be practicing at home. I think that that's important. And the other thing about this is that, of course, this is an entirely supplemental service. We're in no way trying to be a learn how to play piano service online. I think that a lot of times that becomes the focus of online music education stuff too much, it's like, music education, we can actually just, learn piano for $5.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're done. And I think that what is going to happen more and more is that we're going to come to realize how essential, and of course you understand this, how essential private lessons really are, but how powerful the internet is as a supplemental service. I like to have people think about Sight Reading Academy as a method book, basically the same as any method book that you or your students would be using, but a method book that takes advantage of modern technology for the multimedia video exercises, and also for this constant flow, this constant stream of new sight reading materials to your students.
Yeah. No, great kind of summary of how it's all going to work. I can imagine some teachers may be saying, "Oh, look, my students are pretty good. They sight read pretty well. Am I going to get much use out of this?" What would you say?
Well, I think that a lot of teachers do teach sight reading in lessons. Not as many as should be teaching sight reading lessons, but I certainly know that there are plenty of fantastic teachers out there who are teaching it well. But I would question not how you're teaching it in lessons, but rather, how are your students practicing at home? Because you can give them all of the technique, and you can give them all of the correct ways to be sight reading and get the most out of their sight reading, but they have to be able to put it into practice. They're able to practice their pieces, right, and their scales and their exercises 7 days a week or however much. But are they able to practice sight reading in that way? And that's kind of where we want to step in and be that method book that gets students all of that music, so that they can just, we don't practice reading a chapter out of a book 1,000 times in a week so that then we can read it for our friends. We're reading new books all the time, right? We're reading new words all the time. I kind of want to start a revolution here. I want to make.
Let's do it.
That's right. Let's do it. I want to make sight reading. I want to make sight reading sight reading music as natural as reading a book is to people. Because it's just something that you do every single day. Of course, there's a place for working on those pieces that are going to stretch you and that you have to work very hard on. But I think that it's essential to be reading new music, every single day. And I'm excited to see what can happen when students kind of grow up on a system like this, where they really have been reading new music every day for for years. What kind of sight readers is that going to churn out? You know, I'm very excited by that prospect.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And look, I think we can't help but fail to mention that it's going to be fun for, well, more interesting anyway for most students who enjoy using technology, and who are going to really enjoy not just here's a piece of music, sight read it, but here's some interactive, effectively, videos to sight read and help you get better.
That's been the feedback that I've gotten already, is that I've had plenty of students who have told me, or told somebody else, that they actually enjoy this portion of their practice more than anything else, because it's exciting to read new music, especially if it's level appropriate. And we should get into that just a little bit. The levels on Sight Reading Academy are set up to be appropriate to one level above where they are. So let me step back for a second. Yeah. If you are a level 1 pianist, say you're working out of Faber or Elford or Bastion, or I don't know what you guys might have in Australia, but
we use many of the same kind of methods.
Okay.
Piano Adventures as well.
Yes, exactly, the Faber. Yeah. If you're in a level 1, you shouldn't be sight reading level 1 material. So level 1 in the Sight Reading Academy is appropriate for level 1, but the music is of a level that would be pre-reading, right? It would be like those primer books. It would be pre-level 1 material. So your students should be able to use the level of sight reading that they are in whatever book you're working with. Mm-hmm. But that is because the level of music that they'll be greeted with is of a lower degree. Yeah. Exactly. So it makes it fun for them too, because it's something that they can do. They can handle it. They can sight read this stuff, and so they get to experience all this new music all the time. You know, It's a good time.
That idea of making sure that it's at the right technical level is so important, because it's just easy for students to get completely devastated, isn't it? When it's always too hard.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. So that's a good point. And for teachers in Australia and the UK, might be good for us to talk off camera about how that might link to the grade levels that students do exams at here, because that's kind of how it's based. Once a lot of teachers in Australia, I think, may only go up a few levels in a primer book, a method book, before they move to our exam system. So we might put a note in the show notes about how that might correlate to the Australian system.
Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly put that together.
Yeah, cool. And I was just thinking one other thing. When I register as a teacher and I invite my students to join, will I then be able to track their progress or see what they're doing?
Yeah, exactly. When you go to your teacher dashboard, you'll be able to see a list of your students. You click on the student, and then you'll be able to see a list of their recently completed days of sight reading along with the date that they completed that. It's pretty rudimentary. There's not like fantastic practice tracking or anything like that involved, but you can check in and make sure that Billy's doing 5 days a week or whatever you want to do.
Yeah. No, that's great. Look, Colin, I reckon this is, as I say, it's revolutionary. It's a completely new way of looking at it. Not only have you got these great tips and these tools that actually train the eye and the brain to improve, but you've got endless repertoire, so teachers just don't have to worry about it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So now the big question is, where do we go to find your information and your website?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sightreadingacademy.com. And the offers that I'll have for your listeners will be /Tim. Okay. I think I'll put that up so that they can download the PDF cheat sheet sort of what we went over, those 9 tips, as well as some pretty cool offers for them to be able to try out the Sight Reading Academy for free.
Good. And so can you give us an indication, do you know yet exactly what kind of cost it will be for students or teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's at full price, which of course your listeners will be able to try it out for free, and during the week of launch, there will be a lot of discounts and everything.
Sure.
But full price is going to be $8.95 a month, or you can sign up for a semester, which from whatever point that you start is going to be 4 months long. Okay. So a 4-month semester is going to be $21. So obviously a fantastically better deal. Do that one instead.
Absolute bargain. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And is that's per student?
That is the individual account, yes.
Yeah. So
and then
is the teacher account kind of free, and then the students pay for the monthly access under them, or how does that work?
right. Well, the way either you can have your students sign up in individual accounts and pay the full amount,
Okay.
or if you want to give your students a better deal than that, or perhaps you are in a studio and you see the value proposition here, and you see it as something that may even make lessons so much more fun as to drive up student retention and thereby increase your profits.
Yeah.
If you want to go that route, then you can purchase a teacher account with differing levels depending on how many students you have.
Okay.
Depending on how many students, especially as a studio, when you get up there, you can really drop the price down. Depending, if you get up to like 50 students, 100 students, whatever, obviously it's going to be going down a lot. But even if you only have 5, you'll be getting a better deal for sure than the individual accounts. And then of course you can either build it in, you can either build it into the price.
Charge your parents on charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can build it in like that. You can make it an optional thing. These are just some ideas for teachers.
Yeah.
You can make it an optional thing where those certain students that feel the drive that may benefit more than others from this, they can opt in for whatever additional fee, and then you just bill it through them, or you can just let them know about it so that they can sign up for an individual account. Any of those ways would work fine.
Okay. Sounds great. And look, it sounds like a bargain at that whole semester price. But regardless, you're offering listeners free access for, is it a couple of weeks or a month, or how's that going to work?
Yeah. Well, as an individual, for an individual account, you can grab 2 weeks for free on your own. If you're a teacher, you can actually sign up a student for a free month.
Fantastic. And that's so you got full access. You can choose the level that the student's at, test it all out, use it in lessons. They can use it at home, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Sounds
no
great.
reason not to.
Sounds really good, Colin. Well, look, thank you very much for that offer. So all the details of that offer will be in the show notes. And for more information, you can go to timtopham.com/episode 4. This is, let me just check. Yeah, episode 4. And we'll have a link there through to the Sightreading Academy landing page where you can get the coupon codes and all that kind of stuff. So, Colin, awesome. That is just so much to take in. I'm really looking forward to hearing what teachers think about this. Did you have anything just final to say to wrap up at all? I think we've covered most things pretty well.
Man, we really got through all my talking points, I think.
That's excellent. And look, it's been a long one, but it's been really, really good. I've learned a lot. We're going to have a lot of notes from it as well. So that link again, timtopham.com/episode 4. So thank you, Colin, very much. Great talking to you again. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. Yeah, no worries at all. No, it's good. And the next episode is going to be all about creativity at the piano with Bradley Sowash and Leela Viss, and that's in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, I look forward to speaking to you. And make sure you get online and leave some comments. I'm sure Colin will be more than happy to answer any comments that are left on the show notes page if you've got any questions for him. So thanks again, mate, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.